Hey guys, my name is Jeff. Welcome back to HatCamBass's Beginner's Guide to Bass Fishing. This is part 7. In this episode, we're going to talk about the basics of locating bass so that you have a better idea of where to start fishing. Probably the most important question in bass fishing is, where do you find fish? It doesn't matter what bait you're using, what technique, or how expensive your equipment is, you're simply not going to catch fish if they aren't there. Even professional anglers can struggle with this because bass behavior is constantly changing along with several variables. So for the guide, we'll talk about some very basic tips for locating bass, but first, to help answer that all-important question, we want to talk about two very important things: structure and cover. So what is structure and cover, and what makes them so important? Well, structure is the actual bottom surface of a body of water, and cover are the objects that can exist on that surface. Cover would include naturally formed objects like lily pads or trees, and also man-made objects like docks or bridges. Bass often gravitate towards cover for several different reasons. It can provide protection, or it can be an ambush point to attack prey, among other things. But even more important than cover is structure. When you think structure, you should think change, specifically elevation changes. A specific arrangement of these changes makes what we call structural features, and here's what some common ones look like. Early studies of basic bass behavior found that bass will always orient themselves around structure, and they use them exclusively to navigate from point A to point B. So the reality of bass fishing is that you're likely never going to find bass without first finding structure. So go out, find those changing bottom features or structure first, and from there you can start targeting specific pieces of cover around that structure to give you the best chance of catching fish. Now let's talk about some specific tips for locating bass. Look for cover. Make casts over lily pads, through grass, or around docks. Remember, not all pieces of cover are above the surface, so also be mindful of what might be hidden underneath. Cast parallel to the bank. Shorelines are, by definition, structural features, so you can expect to find bass there. Casting parallel to the shore keeps your bait in an area we call the strike zone for a longer period of time, therefore increasing your odds of hooking a fish. When fishing a lake or pond, points are one of the most productive and easy to spot structural features where you can find fish. Check any map and look for areas like this where the land juts out into the water. This is a point, and it's a great place to start looking for fish. Don't forget that a body of water is three-dimensional. That's to say, it also has depth. Fish will occupy various depths depending on certain variables, so if you feel you're in a good location to catch fish, be sure to cast and retrieve your bait at different depths to find them. If you happen to catch a fish, take a mental note of the depth, structural features, cover, and other variables, because you could use that information later to find other fish. For example, if you catch a fish in 10 feet of water around a point, you should try fishing a different point at the same depth on another part of the lake. We call this patterning in bass fishing, and it's a great way to narrow your focus to find fish. And finally, look for bait. Ultimately, a bass will almost always be near its food source. So if you spot something that a bass might eat, which can be a number of things, then you can expect one to be nearby. So now that we have a better idea of how to locate bass and where we should be fishing, I want you to forget about all that for just a second and remember this. You can't catch fish if you don't go fishing. A much wiser man once told me that, and the point he was trying to make was be careful of overcomplicating your fishing. We could think of 1,000 reasons why we're failing, why we aren't catching fish, so the better approach is always simplicity. Never hesitate to go fishing because you never know what's waiting for you on the next cast. All right, that's going to do it for part 7. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed the guide so far. If you have, hit that like button. Share it with people you know that are interested in bass fishing. We're going to move on to part 8 now. We're going to talk about how to properly use our bait cast reels to make those casts. We have our essential baits. We're ready to go. We just need to tie up our baits to our line with a really strong knot. Now, choosing which baits to use can be one of the more fun aspects of bass fishing because there's just so many different kinds to try and experiment. Those are some pretty good choices, but an even better choice, in my opinion, is the uni knot, which is what I recommend to anyone starting out. It's arguably one of the strongest knots that there is, and it's also pretty easy to tie with some practice. Begin by pushing the top of the bait through the point of the hook. Slide it down just a little bit,